Darwin's Inferences and the Evidence for Evolution. In this presentation, we will expand on Darwin's inferences and examine the diverse scientific evidence that supports the theory of evolution. First, let's begin with Darwin's inferences and explore their significance in understanding evolution. And then, in the second half, we will examine all of the evidence that supports the theory of evolution by natural selection. From the previous presentation, we learned that if certain heritable traits enhance an organism's chances of survival, these traits will accumulate in populations over generations. This occurs because individuals with advantageous traits have a better chance of survival and produce more offspring than those without these traits. Consequently, the genes associated with these advantageous traits are more likely to be passed on to the next generation's gene pool. But what happens when there are unpredictable changes in the environment? Sudden, unpredictable changes can make the environment hostile to many organisms. In such scenarios, individuals who were previously the best adapted to their environments may no longer have the same advantage. Moreover, those who were not the best fit before may emerge as a stronger species in the new environment. In conclusion, genetically determined traits, inherited or introduced via mutations, may or may not provide an advantage during times of crisis. These genetically inherited traits can be beneficial, harmful, or neutral. The effects of inherited traits on a species' survival or extinction can only be determined over time. It is important to understand that traits that are beneficial today, those that best adapt organisms to their current environments, may become harmful traits in a new, different environment. Now, let's examine some of the scientific evidence that supports evolution. The evidence for evolution spans multiple disciplines, including fossil evidence, homology between species, chemical and molecular unity of life, biogeography, antibiotic resistance, and convergent evolution. In the rest of this presentation, we will go over these examples, beginning with fossil evidence. Now, let's define fossils. What are they? Fossils are remains or traces of organisms from the past, found in layers or strata of sedimentary rock. The fossil record provides evidence of changes within groups over time, showing the origin of new species and the extinction of others. Paleontologists have discovered fossils of many transitional forms. Since the 1920s, hundreds of well-dated intermediate fossils have been found in Africa. These fossils show transitional species linking our common ancestors with apes, such as chimpanzee, to modern humans over the past 6 to 7 million years. To summarize, the fossil record provides compelling evidence for evolution, documenting changes within groups over time, the emergence of new species, and the extinction of others. The second evidence of evolution lies in homology. Homology is similarity between species that results from common ancestry. For instance, consider the example of insect mouthparts. Among insects, butterflies have proboscis for sucking nectar, beetles have mandibles for chewing, and mosquitoes have needle-like structures for piercing and sucking blood. All these varied adaptations between butterflies, beetles, and mosquitoes stem from a common ancestral insect's mouth structure. Another example of homology lies in the forelimbs of vertebrates, the human arms, whales' flippers, bats' wings, and horses' legs. Despite their differing functions, these forelimbs share a similar bone structure: humerus, radius, ulna, carpals, and phalanges, indicating a common ancestor. Similar to homology in adults, comparative embryology reveals anatomical homologies at the early stages of development. For example, the embryos of humans and chickens both have pharyngeal pouches and a tail, which are strikingly similar and difficult to distinguish at these stages. Homology, or the similarity between species, such as insect mouthparts, vertebrate forelimbs, and the embryonic development of humans and chickens, arises due to common ancestry. This provides strong evidence of a shared evolutionary origin, demonstrating the connections between different species through descent from a common ancestor. The third evidence for evolution lies in the chemical and molecular unity of life, which demonstrates shared biochemical and genetic foundations across all living organisms. For example, All living things on Earth share the ability to create complex molecules from carbon and a few other elements. In fact, 99% of the proteins, carbohydrates, fats, and other molecules in living organisms are made from only 6 of the 92 naturally occurring elements. Moreover, the tens of thousands of protein types found in living organisms are all composed of just 20 amino acids. Furthermore, despite the immense diversity of life on Earth, the DNA of all organisms is composed of the same 4 bases: adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. To summarize, the chemical and molecular unity of life provides strong evidence for a shared common ancestry among all organisms. Despite Earth's vast diversity, the universal use of a few basic elements, amino acids, and DNA bases supports the theory of evolution. The fourth line of evidence supporting evolution is biogeography, the study of the geographic distribution of species. Biogeography highlights how species distribution and adaptations provide insight into their evolutionary history. Biogeography can be better understood by considering Earth's history, where the continents were once united as a single large landmass called Pangaea. Over time, continental drift caused by plate tectonics separated this landmass into the continents we see today, influencing the distribution and evolution of species. As a result, many islands have developed endemic species, those native to a specific island and found nowhere else. For example, the Galapagos tortoise is an endemic species of the Galapagos Islands. Similarly, major isolated land areas have often evolved their own distinct plant and animal species. Understanding continental drift and the current distribution of species allows scientists to predict when and where different groups evolved on their timeline. To summarize, biogeography supports evolution by demonstrating how the geographic distribution of species reflects their evolutionary history. Understanding continental movement and species distribution helps scientists trace evolutionary timelines and predict when and where different groups evolved. The next line of evidence for evolution lies in bacterial resistance to antibiotics. Bacterial colonies develop resistance over time through the process of evolution as advantageous mutations are selected for in environments with antibiotic exposure. Since bacteria have very short generation times, the odds of a mutation occurring during DNA replication are much higher. As a result, when an antibiotic is applied, the initial dose kills most bacteria, leaving behind only those few bacteria with mutations necessary to resist the antibiotics. This is natural selection in action. The antibiotic is selecting for bacteria that are resistant, killing any that are not. In subsequent generations, the resistant bacteria reproduce, forming a new colony where every member is immune because they inherited immunity from the resistant strain. The same principle applies to mosquitoes, which may either possess the resistant alleles through inheritance or mutation, or lack them. These resistant alleles confer them the ability to survive exposure to insecticides such as DDT. Over time, natural selection will favor the resistant strains of mosquitoes, increasing their prevalence in the gene pool of subsequent generations. To summarize, bacterial resistance to antibiotics and mosquito resistance to insecticides demonstrate evolution through natural selection. In both cases, individuals with genetic mutations that confer resistance survive and reproduce, passing on these advantageous traits to future generations. Over time, the resistant strains dominate the population, illustrating how selective pressures drive evolutionary change. The last and final evidence for evolution comes from understanding convergent evolution. Convergent evolution is the process whereby unrelated or distantly related organisms independently evolve similar traits as a result of adapting to similar environments. The two species involved in convergent evolution are not related via a recent common ancestor. Instead, they adapt in similar environments, away from one another. For example, let's compare the wings of birds with the wings of bats. Their wing structure differs anatomically. Bird wings are supported by feathers and modified forelimbs, while bat wings are supported by elongated fingers covered with a thin membrane. Similarly, the sugar glider and the flying squirrel are very similar in their small rodent-like body structures, The thin membrane connecting their forelimbs to their hind limbs is used to glide through the air in the same fashion. Another example of convergent evolution is the body structure of sharks and dolphins. While sharks are fish and dolphins are mammals, they share similar body shapes and swimming methods, adapted for efficient movement through the ocean. This similarity arises not because they share a recent common ancestor, but because they live in similar environments and have adapted in similar ways to survive. Unlike divergent evolution, which is often simply referred to as evolution, and where similarities arise due to a shared ancestry, convergent evolution does not provide information about ancestry. Convergent evolution leads to the development of similar or analogous traits in unrelated groups as they independently adapt to similar environments in comparable ways. To summarize, convergent evolution serves as evidence of how natural selection drives adaptation across different lineages, reinforcing evolution as a fundamental process shaping biodiversity. This marks the end of today's presentation. Today, we explored how Darwin's theory of evolution is supported by fossil records, homologous structures, chemical and molecular similarities, geographic distribution of species, bacterial resistance to antibiotics, and examples of convergent evolution. Thank you for joining this exploration of evolution. Stay curious and keep observing the natural world around you.